Live NFL trivia every Wednesday night on Twitch at 9 p.m. Eastern. Come show off your football knowledge for a chance to win cash prizes. Check the link in the description to find out more. And now, on with our feature presentation. One of the downsides, if you even want to call it that, of being a good team is that eventually you'll lose your coordinators, and you'll lose parts of the coaching staff that made the team so successful in the first place. It's completely natural to have this happen. When an assistant coach does well, they want to be the one in control and want to run the show their way, especially since there are only 32 of these head coaching jobs in the world. And when you've got about 25% of the league looking to hire a new coach on a yearly basis, they'll usually start their search with assistants who are with successful teams. Just look at the men who got hired this past cycle and the previous cycle. DeMeco Ryans, hired by the Houston Texans, was part of a team that made it to the NFC Championship in back-to-back seasons, and had the #1 defense by a country mile in the NFL this year. Nathaniel Hackett, hired by the Denver Broncos, as bad as a head coach as he was there, was a highly successful offensive coordinator with the Green Bay Packers, and was part of a team that got the #1 seed in back-to-back seasons, made it to the NFC Championship twice in 3 years, and had an MVP quarterback in Aaron Rodgers in consecutive seasons. As a side note, to learn more about just how bad Hackett was as a head coach, click the card in the upper right corner. Brian Daboll, hired by the New York Giants, was the offensive coordinator of a Buffalo Bills team in 2021 that was #3 in the NFL in points scored, and was #2 in 2020 when they made it to their first AFC Championship since the 1993 season. You get the idea. Good teams will have their really good coordinators get poached. But usually when it happens, it's only one of them. Sure, the offensive coordinator might get poached, but the defensive coordinator will stay for at least another year. You don't have to worry about losing your offensive coordinator and your defensive coordinator in the same year to higher positions, and not by your own choosing of wanting to fire them. And that's what makes this predicament that the Philadelphia Eagles are in all the more interesting. Because on the heels of losing Super Bowl 57 to the Kansas City Chiefs, which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner, they now find themselves having to retool their entire coaching staff. Because not even 48 hours after the big game, they not only lost their offensive coordinator, but they lost their defensive coordinator as well. Offensive coordinator Shane Steichen, who served as the team's offensive coordinator for the past 2 seasons, accepted the head coaching position with the Indianapolis Colts, who needed a new head coach after firing Frank Reich, and then having the Jeff Saturday experiment not work out in the slightest bit, to the shock of no one. To say that Steichen did a great job as Philly's offensive coordinator in 2022 would be an understatement, as under him, the Eagles had the 3rd best offense in the league in total yardage, and had the 3rd best offense in points scored. Because of Steichen's scheme and his ability to get the most out of his offense, you had 6 players on the Eagles receive Pro Bowl honors, including quarterback Jalen Hurts, who played at a near MVP level, running back Miles Sanders, wide receiver A.J. Brown, and 3 offensive linemen in Jason Kelce, Lane Johnson, and Landon Dickerson. He's now off in Indy on a 6-year deal, as he looks to turn around a Colts team that has not won the division since 2014, as crazy as that might seem to believe. And if that wasn't bad enough for Nick Sirianni to replace, he's also got to replace his defensive coordinator, as Jonathan Gannon, after being the team's defensive coordinator for the past 2 seasons, accepted the head coaching job with the Arizona Cardinals, who needed a new head coach after firing Cliff Kingsbury. Now, the reaction to the Eagles losing Gannon is a lot less, shall we say, sad, as I think most Eagles fans are fine having a new defensive coordinator in charge, seeing as Gannon's defenses continuously got exposed against better quarterbacks, and seeing as the defense completely fell apart in the Super Bowl once the Chiefs ran the same play for a touchdown in the red zone not once, but twice. Regardless, Nick Sirianni, who has never had to hire another offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator, has to not only do that, but will likely have to replace a large portion of his staff. Remember, The NFL isn't necessarily about what you know, but rather who you know. And that means that when Steichen assumes a position with the Colts, he might poach Eagles assistants at lower positions with him and make one of them his offensive coordinator. The same holds true for Gannon, as when he goes to the Cardinals, he might take some assistants from Philly with him and give them elevated roles on the staff that they wouldn't have gotten with the Eagles. Again, teams lose coordinators because they took head coaching positions all the time. That's not a story. But to lose two in the same year? That's a lot more rare. And that got me to thinking. We've heard all this talk about the Eagles and this being their one shot at the Super Bowl, since they have one of the oldest rosters in football by average age, since they've got Jalen Hurts on a rookie contract, where he's currently entering the final year of a 4-year, $6 million deal that nets him an average of $1.5 million per year now, but will net him upwards of $40 to $45 million going forward, and since they've got to replace some starters in free agency. And when you combine losing both coordinators in the same year, and especially so late in the coaching carousel, where all the attractive guys have already been hired since the season was over more than a month ago for most teams, it's a lot. So I wanted to ask the question, just based on the coordinator position, if we're going off of NFL history, are the Philadelphia Eagles going to be okay? Here's the criteria that I looked at, and it's pretty simple. I just wanted to see how many teams lost their offensive coordinator and their defensive coordinator in the same season, and how they did the following year. Now, the catch is that they had to lose their offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator because they assumed a head coaching position somewhere else. I want to focus on teams where their assistant got a promotion. If a head coach fired his offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator because they stunk and he wanted to clean house, that doesn't count. If a team fired their OC and their DC because they went 3-13 the previous year, again, that doesn't count. I'm talking about a situation like the Eagles, where Sirianni would have kept his coordinators, but for the fact that Steichen and Gannon took head coaching jobs elsewhere. I went all the way back to the NFL-AAFC merger in 1950, simply because things get a bit weird if you go past that, since you had player coaches and franchise relocations galore. But I think that the last 70 plus years of history gives us a pretty good idea of what happens when a team loses both of its top assistants in the same offseason. This has only happened 4 times before. And I know that a sample size of 4 isn't exactly the greatest or most statistically significant in the world. But if this sample size is any indication, I'll just spoil it right now. The Philadelphia Eagles are going to be okay. Seriously, deep breaths, they'll bounce back from this, they will be just fine. Let's start with the last time this happened, which was entering the 2014 season. In 2013, the Cincinnati Bengals went 11-5, and finished first in the AFC North, making it to the playoffs for the 3rd straight season, and winning the division for the first time since 2009, and for just the 3rd time in the last 2 decades. They did this thanks to a great offense, led by offensive coordinator Jay Gruden, which finished 6th in the NFL in points scored, and a great defense, led by defensive coordinator Mike Zimmer, which finished 5th in the NFL in points allowed. I should note that under Zimmer, this was the 3rd straight season, and the 4th time in the last 5 years, that Cincinnati's defense ranked inside the top 10 of the league in points allowed. That offseason, the Bengals got hit hard, as Gruden was hired to be Washington's head football coach, while Zimmer was hired to run the Minnesota Vikings. However, despite the losses, in 2014, the Bengals picked up right where they left off, finishing the season with a 10-5-1 record and another appearance in the playoffs. Sure, the offense and defense regressed a bit, as the offense only ranked 15th and the defense only ranked 12th, but from a wins and losses standpoint, the loss of Gruden and the loss of Zimmer did not stop the Bengals from once again making it back to the playoffs. Prior to the Bengals, this happened after the 2006 season with the San Diego Chargers, which is ironic, because the Chargers actually fired their head coach after they went 14-2 that year. Why Marty Schottenheimer was fired is still a mystery more than a decade and a half later, and is still widely controversial. But regardless, the Chargers were a great team in 2006, and that's putting it lightly. Heck, they had the best record in football, had the number 1 offense in the league with Cam Cameron as the offensive coordinator, and had the number 7 defense in the league with the legendary Wade Phillips as the defensive coordinator. That offseason, though, both Cameron and Phillips were out the door to take on head coaching roles elsewhere in the NFL, with Cameron going to Miami and with Phillips going to Dallas. Despite the new coordinators at the helm in 2007, the Chargers were just fine. They not only went 11-5 and won the AFC West, but they made it to the AFC Championship for the first time since 1994. And they actually improved defensively, jumping up from 7th place to 5th place. The loss of the coordinators didn't make any difference in terms of the team being successful or not. Those are the only 2 times this happened in the 21st century, as the other 2 times that this happened occurred in the 1990s, which is getting further and further away from us with each passing day. Because prior to the Chargers, this happened after the 1998 season with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Since 2008, when Mike Smith got hired by the Atlanta Falcons to be their head coach, following his stint as the Jags defensive coordinator, not a single assistant on the Jaguars has been poached for a promotion, whether it was for a head coaching job, an offensive coordinator job, or a defensive coordinator job. It's been a decade and a half since this happened down in Duval. So the 1998 season felt like an alternate dimension of sorts. Regardless, in 1998, the Jaguars, in just their 4th season, made it to the playoffs for the 3rd consecutive season. And not only that, but they won the AFC Central for the first time ever, and made it to the divisional round after hosting their first playoff game ever. The Jags offense was a top 10 offense in 1998, led by team legends to this day like Mark Brunell, Fred Taylor, Jimmy Smith, Keenan McCardle, and of course, eventual Hall of Famer Tony Boselli on the offensive line. No, the defense was not as good, nor was it ever any good under Dick Jauron, as in his 4 seasons with the team, the defense never finished higher than 15th in the league in points allowed and 15th in yards given up. However, after the 1998 season, both coordinators that Tom Coughlin employed left the team, as offensive coordinator Chris Palmer assumed the head coaching position with the de facto expansion Cleveland Browns, while defensive coordinator Dick Jauron assumed the head coaching position with the Chicago Bears. So, no returning coordinators? No problem, as in 1999, the Jaguars put together their best season in franchise history, going 14-2, winning the division, making it to the AFC Championship, and finishing with the best record in the NFL. In fact, both the offense and the defense improved, with the defense making a noticeable jump from 17th in 1998 to 1st in 1999. So that's a good sign to say the least. And finally, the only other time this happened in NFL history was after the 1994 season, when the San Francisco 49ers put together one of the greatest seasons in NFL history by going 13-3, and by winning their 5th, and to date, their final Super Bowl title in franchise history, when they defeated the San Diego Chargers 49-26 at Super Bowl 29. As a side note, to learn more about that game and that Super Bowl, click the card in the upper right corner. George Seifert assembled a great staff by his side, with Mike Shanahan leading the offense, and with Ray Rhodes leading the defense. Shanahan led the 49ers to the number 1 offense in the NFL in 1994, just as he had done in 1993 as the team's offensive coordinator, and just as he had done in 1992. For 3 straight years under Shanahan, the 49ers had the number 1 offense in football, so it was no surprise when the Denver Broncos came calling after the 1994 season to make him a head coach. And on defense, in his only season with the 49ers, Rhodes had the 6th best defense in the league, including a defense that was number 1 in interceptions. He assumed the head coaching position in 1995 with the Philadelphia Eagles. Obviously, the 49ers were going to be worse in 1995, simply because it was tough to do better. I mean, they won the Super Bowl that year. But even though they lost Shanahan and Rhodes, and had to replace both of their coordinators, they still managed to go 11-5 in 1995, receive a first-round bye, and make it to the divisional round. So I think it's fair to say that they turned out okay, even if, by the crazy good standards of the 49ers back then, they might have underperformed. Those are the 4 teams in NFL history to go through what the Eagles are going through right now. You had the Bengals after the 2013 season, the Chargers after the 2006 season, the Jaguars after the 1998 season, and the 49ers after the 1994 season. And all 4 teams turned out just fine. They all made it to the playoffs. 3 of the 4 made it as far or further than they did the year before, and 3 of the 4 won their division. They all finished with double-digit wins. In the last season they had with their coordinators, the combined win-loss record of the teams was 49-15. In the first season with the new staff, they went 46-17-1. So they went from winning over 76.5% of the time to winning just under 73% of the time, which is not anything concerning in the slightest bit. Either way, you're still winning about 3 out of every 4 games. Now, this doesn't mean that the Eagles can't struggle in 2023. You could have the Super Bowl hangover, you could have players leaving, and you could have a whole bunch of other things happen, especially when it comes to injuries. But in terms of struggling because they lost their coordinators, it's a non-issue. Because if history is anything to go off of, the Eagles will still be flying high in 2023. Get your official Jaguar Gator 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, and subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out Twitch every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL trivia and win cash prizes. Link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at Jaguar Gator 9. To see college football videos, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To see highlight videos of players throughout the history of the NFL, subscribe to JG9 Highlights. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.